Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Rough Vocal Effects 101. In the last video of this series, we were talking about every vocal effect that is produced by only the true vocal folds. This time we're going to be concerned with how we can use our false vocal folds to get grit on the voice. And we're going to have a look at 3 main ways to achieve that. So what even are the false vocal folds? The false folds, they used to be called false chords. Phoneticians might also refer to them as vestibular or ventricular folds. They are little tissues that lie above our true vocal folds. So you might remember me doing something like this with my hands when referring to true fold phonation. And maybe you noticed that my thumbs are not doing much. You could imagine my thumbs being the false folds, above the true folds. And when I sing a normal clean pitch like ah, they're just relaxing. But when I do something like ah, they're coming together every second time that the true folds touch. Okay, so they're phonating at half the frequency of the true folds. It might also be another part of the frequency, a third, a quarter, but the essential thing is they are phonating too. They come together in addition to my normal pitch. So now that's the question, how do we access our false folds? Well, I'm sure that most of you have already unconsciously felt them if you've ever cleared your throat or lifted a heavy weight or sat at the toilet and pooped. Those are just little everyday actions that involve the false folds, and also in communication we use them to express ourselves. For example, if we're super stressed out, like this, we use the false folds. Or if we're super angry at a person and yell at them, which is hopefully not something that happens super often, but if you've ever done that, it might have sounded something like this. Hey! This is us engaging the false folds. Or if we're imitating a heavy smoker who always talks like this and a super gritty voice, we are actually talking with our false vocal folds added onto our true vocal folds. So those are just a bunch of little methods to find this false fold tone that we use for all of these distortion techniques later on. If it still hurts a little bit or irritates your throat and you feel like you have to cough, that is a sign you're using too much air. No, that's not good. We're searching for a very clear tone. It's kind of paradox, but should be 2 distinct pitches at the same time, okay? So take your time, experiment a little bit with that, and once you found that tone, you're ready for the next step. Okay, so theoretically, you could already sing like this at a lower range, like yeah? Or also in throat singing. Yeah, this would already be half of what you do for the traditional Kagura throat singing technique. But what if you want to take that distortion to a higher range? Well, there's 3 main strategies to achieve that. The first one is actually kind of intuitive. It sounds like this. Yeah! I would call that one pushing. Is that a sustainable or healthy technique? No, absolutely not. It doesn't completely wreck my voice, at least not immediately. And I have to admit that I use it sometimes in certain songs. But it's basically violently pushing the air through the folds and thus forcing the false folds together. You could also say I'm just grinding my tissues against each other, so I really wouldn't recommend that one. Why did I include it in this video then? Well, the first reason is very simple. It exists. I hear many singers do that one. Also, I find it really cool. I think that's a really, really expressive effect. Like, yeah, yeah! This kind of sound, I hear it very often. And just for the sake of completeness, I wanted to include it here. Still, especially if you're not a professional singer, please don't try that alone. Okay? Let's just go on to the next effect. If you want to take distortion into a higher range without harming your voice, you have to make some regulations. The first thing you need for that is good closure. Especially if you tend to speak in a very soft and breathy way, you need to get this down before going on. An easy way to achieve closure or remove breathiness is to just speak vowels in a very confident way. Ah, ah, ah. Notice how I'm not doing but actually having a very clear attack, or what we call glottal onset. Once you've found that clear and metallic quality, you can start to play around with it. Yeah. Try out different pitches and also different vowel shapes. E, 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 o, 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 o. Ooh, 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 ooh. You might notice that certain vowels don't work as well, especially if you go higher in the range. If you have problems maintaining that metallic sound quality, try to really get nasty with it. Yeah, this sharp quality is called twang. By twanging, we're basically narrowing the space in the throat, which makes it easier for our folds to thin out and stabilize in that coordination. By the way, if anyone's ever told you to open your throat when singing, please forget about that. Controlled constriction is what makes the voice work. Same thing goes for stuff like nasality and unconventional postures. Anything that makes your singing sound good and feel good is good. Spread the word. Now that we've isolated the relevant muscles, you can try to lean in on that twangy sound until distortion appears. Yeah, the goal is to be able to switch it on and off at will, like this, yeah? This of course implies that you're able to hit the notes you want to distort in a clean way first. Once you've got that though, you can again experiment with the amount of twang and distortion as well as, again, pitch and vowel shapes. Yeah, 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 oh yeah. Of course, there's also a bit of variety within the effect of false fold distortion. For example, you can hit several different subharmonics with it, dependent on pitch, vowels, and intensity. But where exactly these subharmonics change is a rather individual thing, so I guess this one's best for you to figure out for yourselves. You can also do false fold distortion within falsetto, like this, or combine it with other effects such as fry scream to get a grittier sound. So you see, false fold distortion is a very versatile distortion effect. The last kind of false fold distortion relies on a different kind of control, namely the one I call hypercompression, or grandpa voice. Back in my day, we didn't have such fancy terminology! It's basically pressed phonation, or the same thing we have in sitting on the toilet and pooping, or lifting a very heavy weight! In that last one you could already hear the false fold distortion. This is because hypercompression makes the false folds come together very easily. Even in the clean version, they are already approximating. Clean hypercompression can sound a bit dull in the middle range, but actually starts to bloom if you go higher. Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but once you figured out how to do that, it's a nice alternative to the regular kind of mixing. If that one's too bright and nasty and twangy for you. I've already talked several times now about how much of an influence vowels have on how things work, but with hypercompression this actually gets super obvious. If I do a clean hypercompression like oh yeah, you might notice how all the vowels turn into this kind of ish sound, yeah? Even the brighter ones are being modified into their darker, centralized versions. But what if I open up to the belty and vowels? Then I actually already get distortion. Don't believe me? Just listen. Oh! Hey! Can you hear the subharmonics? And if I open up to the even brighter A and E vowels, I get this. Ah! E! Full atonal distortion. The true folds are actually doing what they would do in fry screaming, namely irregular creaking. So this is kind of a hyper-compressed fry scream false fold distortion effect combination. Crazy, right? Of course, you can also manipulate the sound by just increasing or decreasing the support level, so getting more or less intense with it, but why make even more of an effort if you can just make good vowel choices, right? Also, you might have noticed that every time I sing or scream in hypercompression, I do something like this with my head. I know I look kind of silly when I do that, but this is actually the ideal way of anchoring for that effect. You need to make a bit of an adjustment to your posture in hypercompression. Also, take into account that I'm sitting in the car right now. If you're standing on stage, you can just lean forward a bit and have an easier time singing, distorting, screaming in hypercompression like that. You might see metal vocalists who do something like this on stage. So if you see that, this might actually be a kind of hypercompressed technique. Once you get a bit more familiar with those little parameters, hypercompression might actually grow into your most versatile vocal effect, because you can do everything from clean singing, yeah, yeah, over a slight rasp, yeah, and grittier distortions, yeah, yeah, to outright shouting, yeah, yeah, and finally full atonal distortion, yow, 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 all with the same foundation, hypercompression. This is why hypercompression is my favorite vocal effect. Okay, so after this perfect little love story, let's just wrap things up. Today you've got to know 3 main kinds of false fold distortion. The pushy one, yeah! The twangy one, yeah! And the hypercompressed one, yeah! If you're not sure with which technique you should start, I would recommend the twangy distortion, because that one is not only the easiest to get, but also bears the least risk. My beloved hypercompressed distortion will be very safe to do too, but it might also take a lot of time to develop, because it's kind of counterintuitive, always singing and screaming like this! Yeah, so I think the very present and outgoing hey, hey, hey twangy distortion might be a good starting point. Good luck with that, and good night for now.